My talk today, I'm going to talk about the yin and yang of DevOps transformation. And I don't know, looking at this picture, it doesn't quite seem fitting for this philosophical topic. So I don't know, this might be a little bit better. My marketing team wanted me to wear saffron robes up here and sort of preach from the podium here, but I figured this is the best I'm going to do. This is going to be streamed on the internet. So who's familiar with this symbol? Pretty much everyone, right? This is the Chinese symbol for yin and yang. It's called the Tai Chi Tu. It's the universal symbol for the Taoist philosophy as well, and it first appeared in a book called the I Ching around 1000 BC, and I Ching is the book of changes, so very apropos to DevOps. And if you look at the shape, what it actually represents is two seemingly opposing forces, or two seemingly opposing elements that are in fact very complementary, very interdependent, and very connected. And they have to work together in harmony to achieve balance, to achieve flow, etc. And in Taoist philosophy, they talk about the fact that there's a lot of common dualities that you see in nature and in dynamic systems where things have to work together in balance and harmony. But you know, it's interesting. What does this have to do with DevOps? Well, if you look traditionally at Dev and Ops, the pieces haven't fit together very well. I've kind of flipped over the shapes here. And they've generally been seen as opposing here. So as we've talked about a lot this morning, Dev is oftentimes incented around innovation, change, feature delivery on schedule. And Ops has been about stability, uptime, risk aversion. And so, consequently, in traditional IT structures where you're siloed, Dev sees Ops as slow, resistant to change, cautious. And Ops sees Dev as cowboys, invaders, dangerous folks that are sort of invading the castle there. So it's created a lot of conflict and tension. And certainly walls have built up over time. You often hear about throwing things over the wall, and you've seen this in the Dev and Ops world where you've had these silos, and they've built up over time. They've become more fortified, they've become bigger, they've become longer, just like the Great Wall of China that was built up over many centuries during the Ming Dynasty and became over 6,000 meters long. So there's definitely not quite harmony here, not much flow going on in this world. But the reality is that Dev and Ops shouldn't be opposing forces. They really need to be complementary forces. They are very much interdependent and they rely on one another. And you have to have balance between Dev and Ops to achieve flow, to achieve throughput, and for the whole system to be effective. And what I want to do here is I think the yin and yang shape does a very good job of articulating what we're trying to achieve with DevOps. And I just want to walk through Gene Kim's 3 ways of DevOps and map it to this. The first way of DevOps, according to Gene Kim, is systems thinking. It's about not optimizing for the silos, not doing local optimizations, but really looking at the whole system. And for me, the overall circle represents that whole system there. And you can see how the pieces fit together very nicely, very complementary. The second way of DevOps is feedback loops, amplifying feedback loops. And if you look at the nature of the shape, you see the head of one shape feeding into the tail of the other, and vice versa. So this really, for me, represents the fact that development is deploying changes in, you're getting feedback from this running in operations, you're getting measurement, you're getting learnings from something running in ops, and it feeds back into the other piece of the cycle. The third way of DevOps, as Gene describes it, is all around continuous experimentation and learning. And I think you saw a lot of that in the keynote sessions earlier today. It's about iterating, it's about learning, it's about continually improving. And I think if you look at the shape, it kind of conveys this impression of rotational motion and constantly cycling through. Iterate, do something, take some action, learn from it, iterate, repeat the cycle. And I've added a fourth way. One of the things I think we've heard very much this morning, it's a commonly heard thing in the DevOps community, is that DevOps is fundamentally a culture problem. It's fundamentally a people problem. And so I think there's a fourth thing that this shape represents. If you look inside these curved teardrop shapes, you see a dot of the opposing color in there. And this, for me, represents that notion of empathy, of understanding that there is this duality. You're not just developing software, you're not really delivering value unless that software is running in production, if it doesn't go down, and so forth. So it's having that mindset, that shared mindset between Dev and Ops, and understand that you need to have both pieces to have a successful whole. So I want to kind of explore a little bit some other dualities that you see in Dev and Ops. And again, one of the things you see is culture and people being important, and then tools and technology. And as we talked about, it's very much of a culture and a people problem is what you see in DevOps, but you got to have the process and tools as well. I actually rotated the shape in this case, and I've got culture at the top, and that's intentional. If you map it back to the acronym that was coined by John Willis and Damon Edwards in 2010 at the Mountain View DevOps, one of the acronyms they used to describe DevOps was culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. And again, it's no mistake that culture is first. It is one of the most important things. It's one of the foundational things. You got to get the people, you got to get the culture, you got to get the management system right, you have to get the mindset right before you can move on around the horn here and focus in on automation. And then the other elements, which are really the foundations of continuous improvement. It's about measuring, being very data-driven, collecting some of the data, learning from that, sharing some of the learnings, and then adapting and continuing through that iteration cycle. So what are some of the key success factors? I think the sessions this morning were great talking about some of the cultural elements. I think one of the things that's very important, some people talked about squads, some people talked about breaking down functional silos and having cross-functional teams. I think this is a key success factor, is cross-functional teams. This image is from the movie Kung Fu Panda from DreamWorks Animation. And in it you've got this clumsy but very enthusiastic panda that loves Kung Fu, and he starts training with his idols, the Furious Five, the tigress, the crane, the mantis, the viper, and the monkey. And over time he ends up fulfilling the prophecy and working with his teammates who each bring their own individual strengths. That team is more powerful, and by understanding themselves and continually improving, they're actually able to defeat the evil snow leopard here. And just a side note here, as you may be aware, the panda is extremely revered in China. And part of the reason that it's extremely revered is the panda is considered actually a physical manifestation of the yin and yang. You have the pelt with the contrasting colors, and you have the dots for the eyes that represent the dots in the yin and yang symbol. And the perception is that because the panda has such a placid nature, it's reflective of the fact that if you get yin and yang in perfect harmony, you have balance, you have flow, you have peace. Another key important principle is shared mission, values, objectives. This was talked about to a certain extent this morning, how important leadership is and culture and getting alignment. One of the challenges that you see when you have siloed teams is you have divergent mindsets and you have divergent objectives. If you have a situation where development is measured on time to market, how many features you can deliver, and ops is measured on uptime, stability, you get to this point where you have those opposing forces there. So it's very important from a leadership perspective that the leadership team identify a mission, identify values, and identify goals that span that entire organization, and something that gets reinforced over time. So what do we believe? What's important to us as an overall organization, not just as a development team, as a testing team, as an ops team, but what's important to us overall? And having some shared incentives, having some shared goals that everyone is measured on for the organization. And that might be revenue, that might be some other benefits in terms of the business productivity, et cetera. So just to kind of use an example on here, just to kind of bring some of this culture together, this culture topic together. There we go. So I joined Electric Cloud in December of 2012. The company had been around since 2001. And when I got here, we sort of reoriented the strategy all around DevOps. We were going to be a DevOps company, and we felt it was important to revisit our mission and to revisit our values. In our executive team, we actually established a high-level framework. We came up with a draft mission. We came up with a draft values. But to get it right, we felt it was really important to bring in a cross-functional team. We wanted to bring in employees from the various functional areas, and we wanted to bring in people that really embodied what we wanted Electric Cloud to be about. And I have to tell you that going through this exercise, what came out was so much more important. This is now something that really drives our company. It is our shared mission. And so our mission is to help the world deliver better software. And with the executive team came up, it had sort of this essence, but it became even bigger and more inspiring. Again, we got the employees in there. They wanted to say, look, we're doing things that can really change the world. So it became a much better mission statement for us. I think it was even more powerful on the values. And so the executive team, we came up with a list of nouns, the sort of a little bit cliche, some things you typically see. It was okay. But the employee team came together and said, look, we want it to be verbs. We want it to be all about action. We want it to reinforce behavior. And also because we're a DevOps company, we want it to reflect some of the values and principles of DevOps. And the other thing, looking at the duality, for a lot of these values, we wanted them to have internal meaning for us as a company, but also external meaning in terms of how we interact with the marketplace. And so you can see here, the values that we came up with are very similar to what you saw in terms of CAMS, culture, automation, measurement, sharing. What we actually came up with was listen, and it's important to listen externally to what's going on in the marketplace, but there's also the empathy aspect, that you really want to listen to your colleagues. If someone has a different point of view, you want to respect that point of view and see if there's some merit in that. And so it's really all about empathy internally, listening to the market externally. Acting, don't get caught in analysis paralysis. It's important that we deliver, whether we're in R&D, whether we're on the sales side, whether we're on the marketing side. For us, we wanted to be very data-driven. And sharing was something that for us became something that was important internally and externally. It's not enough if I as a developer meet my goal and deliver my feature. Again, we're not delivering value until we've released it to the customer. So we want to have shared success. And if someone else is struggling, if they need help, let's work together to get shared success. But it's also important externally. And for us, we want to be part of the community. One of the reasons we put on this event is that we want to share, we want to bring the community together, we want to participate in that DevOps community. So this is something that drives what we do, and again, it may be different for different organizations in terms of your shared mission and values, but this is something that we use that brings our organization together. We have quarterly culture awards. We recognize people who embody the culture. We reinforce this in our performance reviews. So they may be different from your organization. It may be different for Target. It may be different for Ticketmaster. It may be different for a number of organizations, but it's very important to have shared objectives, shared goals. So I talked a little bit about culture and people, and again, that does come first. I think you heard a lot of other good ideas here earlier today. I do want to talk a little bit about process and tools, because fundamentally, once you get the cultural foundation in place to achieve what you want to get out of DevOps, it really is about automation and automating everything. Drilling into automation, what you do find, though, is that there is a duality here as well, and I think it's important when you look at automation to understand that you have both infrastructure and you have applications. And if you've got applications, they require infrastructure to run on. And if you've got infrastructure but you don't have any applications, it doesn't really provide much value. So they're interconnected, they're interdependent. So going a little bit deeper, if you look at the DevOps landscape, I mentioned there's 47 vendors that are here talking about DevOps. It's a little bit confusing in terms of what are the tools, where do they fit within the landscape. And so we put together a matrix here that kind of presents our view. And again, you can see the dualities here, dev on the left, ops on the right. And then I've got the vertical tiering here where you've got infrastructure on the top and apps on the top and infrastructure on the bottom. And these are some of the common areas that you see in a comprehensive DevOps system. You have to be able to have tools to do development. You have to do CI. You want to be continuously testing. You want to automate your application releases. You need to manage the applications when they're going into production. And then you need to provision the infrastructure. And increasingly nowadays, because of cloud, container technology, virtualization, that's increasingly software-defined infrastructure. And so down here, you've got the likes virtualization from VMware, from OpenStack for private clouds. Amazon has emerged as a leading public cloud vendor, and now you see much more in the way of Docker. And above that, you have next-generation configuration management tools that are model-based, that are declarative. So with this, you can much more readily dynamically provision infrastructure. You can spin it up, and then you can get it configured. And you can do that very dynamically. And this introduction of cloud, this introduction of software-defined infrastructure has been one of the key enablers of DevOps. John Willis sometimes talks about the convergence that's allowed DevOps to happen, and cloud computing and software-defined infrastructure has been one of those key elements. Now, these are phenomenal tools, and these are very important to DevOps, but they don't really do an effective job of addressing the application layers. So you do have tools to manage the application development process, things like GitHub for version control. You've got Atlassian. When you deliver into production, you need to service those applications with a product like ServiceNow. You need to manage that with a product like AppDynamics or something like New Relic. But then if you look at the bridge between all of these, this has been an area that has really started to evolve a lot recently. So you do have Jenkins that a lot of people use for CI. It's a great tool for CI. But then as you start looking beyond that, you do need something that orchestrates the whole continuous delivery process, ties all these tools together, and fills the gap around application release automation. And I'll drill into this in a second. Now you see, what I have shaded in blue is release automation and configuration management. If you look at some of the analyst reports, one of the things that you'll see, they talk about, Gartner has a report and they talk about DevOps ready tools, and they say that these are really the two categories, application release automation and configuration management. These are tools that were designed from the outset to support DevOps. But the reality is to have an effective system and to achieve high levels of flow and a high release frequency, you've really got to orchestrate it all together. So you want to have something that can tie all of these pieces together, and that's one of the things that a product like Electric Cloud can do very well with plugins to all the various tool sets and orchestrate everything that happens after a developer checks in the code through the build stage, provisioning an environment, spinning up something in the cloud or on top of VMware, getting it provisioned, deploying the application, running the tests, moving it down through the pipeline, ultimately releasing into production. So this is a view, for those that are relatively new. I know, like I said, it's been confusing. I hope this framework makes it maybe a little bit less confusing for people that have been in the space for a while. I'd love to get feedback offline if there's things that we can do to improve this picture. So there's still probably confusion. Again, this laid out some of the tools that are in the mix, but one of the things that we commonly hear from CIOs are saying, look, DevOps is coming across the radar screen. I'm starting to hear the business case and some of the business benefits of moving to DevOps. I'm getting a lot of the vendors that are talking to me, but where do I start? There's many different paths that I can take. I showed a number of tools there. Some of them look maybe a little bit less challenging. Others look like they might be a little bit shorter, but a lot steeper. So where do I start? Lao Tzu was considered the founder of the Taoist philosophy, and he has a couple great quotes. One that was mentioned earlier today, where it said, "The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step." There's another one that I think is very instructive, and that's that new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. And again, I think some of the drivers here, you hear about some of the people that have started on their DevOps journey here today. You listen to the Target stories, the Ticketmaster stories. They started from a place of pain, and then they've moved forward and they've made huge strides since then. But for me, what makes this important is to look at where you have the most pain. And in some of your organizations, you may know where that painful area is, and that may instruct you where to start in your DevOps journey. It could be test automation, it could be application deployment, it could be infrastructure provisioning, it could be a number of things, and that may guide your journey. For some of you, you may have quite a bit of pain, and it might be acute across a number of areas, so any guidance on where to start? In the Puppet Labs 2015 State of DevOps report, there was a whole section that talked about code deployment. And code deployment is one of the most common pain areas that we see across organizations. And as is cited in the Puppet Labs report, where you see deployment pain, you often find the poorest IT performance, the poorest org performance, and the weakest culture. And so for many organizations, application deployment becomes a very good place to start if you just want to pick something where you can get going. Electric Cloud, we're in the process of conducting a survey. These are some early results that we have. We have 101 respondents. We surveyed very large organizations. About 60% were Fortune 1000, $1.5 billion in revenue above. And you can see another 2/3 were $500 million to about $1 billion. And this was managers, this was executives. And the results were pretty astonishing when you look at it across these organizations. It was roughly, it's kind of hard to see around the corner here, but production release problems occurred occasionally or frequently in over 70%. I think it was exactly 74% of those surveyed say they commonly have production release problems. One of the reasons for that is probably because over 50% of the people have a different deployment process that they use in development, in QA, and in production, and that inconsistency leads to a lot of issues. Almost 40% say they occasionally or frequently miss release deadlines, and almost 1/3 said that even after they release into the production environment, it's taking them more than a day to stabilize a release. In some cases it's days, in some cases it's weeks. There were even some instances where people were saying it takes months to stabilize a release after deployment. So application deployment is a very, very common pain area. And so it tends to be a great place to start if you have no other. One is because of the fact that it's a pain area. The other thing is, in many organizations, this is the last bastion of automation. What we see with many of the prospects that we talk to is that deployment in many cases is a collection of homegrown scripts that an admin has created. They're not versioned, they're not necessarily managed. The whole process is orchestrated perhaps via a manual runbook and $1 million conference call where everyone sort of coordinates the deployment release. Or the other thing that we see is people are using suboptimal tools. There's a whole category called application release automation that the analysts talk about. In many cases, people will try to use a tool that's not optimized for application release deployment. So using suboptimal tool for the job. You know, the other reason to start here is to do application deployment, it's a cross-cutting concern. You actually have to provision the infrastructure, you have to deploy the application in on top of it, so you're addressing that full stack. But maybe even more importantly, you can start small and you can move incrementally. So you can start automating your application deployments for one application, and then you can expand it to other apps. Or you can start your automation in a particular environment. Maybe production releases are painful. You could start in production, or perhaps you start in test. And then over time, you can extend it out and build out that common deployment process across all the environments. So again, in the absence of any other high-level pain areas, this is generally a pretty good place to start. So kind of coming back, we've talked a lot about culture, we've talked a lot about automation, but it was really in the context of looking at your organization and how you can optimize your organization in isolation. But you know, there's another yin and yang. There's my organization, but there's also our community. And so it is very important to share and collaborate with the rest of the community. And you know, it's been pretty interesting. The DevOps community over time has been a very open, a very generous community. You look back at things like DevOps days, you look at the willingness of people to share what they've learned, share what's worked for them, share some of the challenges that they have, and that's critically important. And as I talked about at the outset, you know, one of the reasons a couple years ago that Gene and I got together is we said there really was no great forum for large organizations, for enterprises that are trying to do DevOps transformation. There's some unique challenges. And I think the fact that we had sold out last year, 600 people, we have 1,200 people in the room, you know, this is a great forum. It's just a phenomenal opportunity to share some of the learnings. I know last year I learned a lot, and even this morning I've just learned a lot from some of the presentations. So great opportunity to share, and we're honored to sponsor this event and help foster some of the sharing within the community. You know, there's other opportunities outside of this forum. As I mentioned before, there's things like DevOps days, there's some other conferences. One of the things I might point you to, Electric Cloud also curates an online discussion series. It's called C99. That's shorthand for continuous discussions. And we run these on a periodic basis every other week or so. And the topics are all relevant to DevOps and continuous delivery. And we bring together practitioners from organizations like yours. We bring together thought leaders. We bring together authors. And it's a great discussion series. The feedback that we've gotten here is pretty phenomenal. It's not just people from Electric Cloud, it's people from across the entire community. So it's a great learning resource, a great way to stay connected to the community throughout the year. Finally, one of the things I'm thrilled to announce is we just delivered to the market a community edition of our Electric Flow product. So Electric Flow has been recognized by the leading analysts as one of the top application release automation firms. I suggested that was one of the great places to start. And if you look at some of the other DevOps tools, a lot of them have been freely available as open source and community editions. So you've got, you know, in the configuration management, you've got Puppet and Chef open source. You know, in containers, you have Docker. You've got Jenkins for CI. You've got freemium versions of New Relic and App Dynamics. And now you have the opportunity to have access to a free version of Electric Flow, which is optimized for application release automation. I'd encourage you to download it, try it, see how it can complement what you already have with something like Jenkins for CI and what you have for, you know, something like Puppet and Chef for configuration management. So, you know, stepping back, coming back to the yin and yang, I touched on this earlier, but I think, you know, the shape conveys rotational motion, and that for me really, you know, speaks to the idea, the concept of the third way of continuous improvement, continuous experimentation, continuous learning. And, you know, I think that's always important. It's important to experiment. to measure, find areas that are still bottlenecks, find where you've got issues in your process, and continue to refine it. I think before you embark on continuous process improvement, though, it is important to focus on the basics. And so before we improve, it's important that we consistently do the basics well, that we consistently practice the fundamentals. And this is one of the reasons why, we advocate automation and try to automate as much as possible. You want to automate, you want to repeat it, you want to do it over and over again. This is a picture of Shaolin monks. Shaolin monks, when they're doing their martial arts, they train 5 to 6 hours a day, and they're doing the basics. They're practicing their punching, they're practicing their punches, the basics, over and over again until it becomes second nature, until it becomes muscle memory. And then once you have the basics right, you can then start to improve. You can then work with others. In this case, you see the Shaolin master. You work with others that have more experience, more diverse experience, can kind of guide you in terms of where to go. And those would be the likes of some of the thought leaders that are here, some of the other folks that are out there. So definitely putting into practice some of the learnings that you have from the conference here. Now, I want to give a shout out here. Electric Cloud has had the privilege of working with some of the largest and most important enterprises in the world, helping those organizations with their continuous delivery and with their DevOps journeys. These are just the customers that we have represented at the conference here with us today. For those of you who are in the room, I really want to thank you for participating and attending with us. But we've had the opportunity to help organizations with their tooling and their transformation and some of the cultural changes across a wide variety of verticals. So across financial services, technology companies, entertainment, e-commerce, transportation. And these are companies that do have that legacy heritage. They've been around for a while. They've got legacy systems. They've got traditional ways of doing things. In some cases, they have silos, and they're evolving over time to implement DevOps. So we've got a lot of experience in doing it. We'd love to partner with organizations that are embarking on this journey to see how we can help. And just to give you one example to continue with the Chinese theme, this is one of our speakers here this week, but Huawei is a customer of ours. And if you're not familiar with Huawei, they are one of the leading network equipment and mobile device manufacturers, a $45 billion company. 2 years ago, they grew from $30 billion to $45 billion moving into mobile phones. And Electric Cloud is used as the DevOps orchestration platform for their network equipment and mobile device software group. And you saw some of the cycle time improvements earlier today on main stage for Huawei. Working with us, they've been able to achieve a 76% cycle time reduction. So when we first started working to do a feature delivery, it would take roughly 28 days, and they've got it down to 7 days, and that's continuing to improve. But what makes this really interesting is the scale at which they're doing it. So you can see here, 10,000 releases a year, 100,000 builds a day, 100 million test case runs a day, and 30 million lines of code. So what this shows is that you can actually do DevOps at scale. I think that was one of the questions: is how do I do this? How do I do this at scale? So for many of Electric Cloud customers, they actually set up a shared service that's supporting thousands of developers, 5,000 developers, 10,000 developers, and doing DevOps at this kind of scale and achieving these kind of cycle time reductions. So we've been there, we've done this for a lot of customers. We'd love to talk to you if you'd like to partner with us on any of your initiatives here. So I think, we'd love to work with your organizations. Like I said, we've done it before. To kind of come back to the Kung Fu Panda theme here, we'd love to help you find your yin-yang balance. We'd love to help you figure out how you can optimize your flow and help all of you become DevOps dragon warriors, if you're familiar with the movie Kung Fu Panda. So with that, that's pretty much what I had. I hope you'll stick around. My colleague, our Chief Product Officer from Electric Cloud, RJ, is going to come up. He's going to talk a little bit more about Electric Cloud's solutions. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.